Hello, welcome back to another evening of shared stories and mysteries. Tonight, we're diving into the darkest corners of Stranger Things Season 5. Whether you're a die-hard fan who's analysed every frame of the trailer, or someone who just enjoys the creepy atmosphere and 80s nostalgia, there's loads of unsettling theories to explore. And I'll be covering the most chilling predictions I could find for tonight. But there's definitely more theories to come. So we'll start with what really happened to Will back in 1983, then move into the darkest character, fates, potential deaths, and some absolutely wild ending scenarios. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your Eggo waffles and flashlight, get cozy under your blanket fort, and let's begin. So way before the final battle can begin, Season 5 takes us back to November 6th, 1983, the night everything started. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed that the very first scene of the final season shows us what really happened to Will Byers during that week he was missing in the Upside Down. And honestly, what they're revealing is way darker than most people expected. Netflix released the first 5 minutes of Season 5, and it kicks off with young Will curled up inside Castle Byers, his little fort in the woods. He's softly singing, "Should I Stay or Should I Go" by The Clash to himself, trying to stay calm in this twisted nightmare version of Hawkins. Then a Demogorgon absolutely smashes through the walls of his hideout, and Will goes sprinting through the dark, gnarled woods of the Upside Down. He manages to climb a tree to safety, but the monster finds him. In desperation, Will leaps to another tree, falls tumbling to the ground, and gets dragged off into the darkness. That's where the clip ends. But what's really unsettling is what it implies about everything that came after. According to the Duffer Brothers, Season 5 will feature multiple flashback scenes that were actually shot during the first season but never used. They've also employed the same CGI de-aging technology they used to make young Eleven look like Millie Bobby Brown in Season 4. This means we're going to see Will's full horror story from his perspective, filling in all the gaps from those terrifying 7 days. Fun fact, Noah Schnapp himself has said that watching these scenes was absolutely brutal. He mentioned in interviews that the show started with Will and it'll end with Will, which has got fans properly worried about what that actually means for his character. But here's where things get really interesting. We've always known Will survived a week in the Upside Down. What we've never understood is how. Barb was taken by the Demogorgon and died almost immediately. She was found cocooned and lifeless in the library pool within a day or two. Other victims throughout the series have had similarly short survival times, once they're dragged into that hellscape. So how did a 12-year-old kid with no powers, no training, and no weapons managed to evade capture and death for an entire week? The most popular theory, and the one that makes the most sense, is that Vecna wanted him alive, not by accident. Not because Will was particularly good at hiding, but because Vecna had plans for him from the very beginning. Think about it. In the Season 5 opening scene, Will encounters something in the Upside Down. The footage shows him being dragged off, but fans who've analysed every frame have noticed something. The creature hunting him isn't moving like a mindless predator. It's methodical, it's herding him, and there are moments in that forest chase where it could have easily caught Will, but seemingly chose not to. What if Vecna, who we now know was controlling the Demogorgons all along, ordered them to keep Will alive? What if he purposefully chose to infect Will with that slug-like creature we saw him cough up at the end of Season 1? What if he's been grooming Will this entire time, preparing him for something? The theory suggests that Vecna saw something in Will. Maybe he recognized a kindred spirit. Maybe he sensed latent abilities. Maybe he just needed a vessel, an anchor to the real world that he could manipulate over time. Because Will's connection to the Upside Down has never actually been severed, despite what Season 2 wanted us to believe. Remember when Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy performed that makeshift exorcism, blasting Will with heat to drive out the Mind Flayer's influence? Everyone acted like it worked. Will seemed fine. The Mind Flayer was gone, and Will was back to normal. Except he wasn't. Throughout Season 3, Will kept sensing things. He'd touch the back of his neck and know something was wrong before anyone else did. When the Mind Flayer returned to Hawkins, Will felt it immediately. Not because he's psychic, but because he's still connected. That link was never broken. It was just dormant. In Season 4, even though Will had moved to California and was hundreds of miles away from Hawkins, he could still sense Vecna's presence. He knew when the Upside Down was active. He felt it stirring. And in the final episodes, when they returned to Hawkins and saw the gates torn open across the town, Will's reaction wasn't surprise, it was recognition. He told the others, "He's not gone. I can feel him." That's not the reaction of someone who was freed from the Upside Down's influence. That's someone who's still tethered to it, still connected on a level that even 11 can't fully understand. What's also fascinating is how many parallels exist between Will and Henry Creel. Before looking into all this, I honestly hadn't considered how similar their stories are. But the connections are absolutely there. Henry, who became Vecna, was described as a sensitive, artistic child who didn't quite fit in with his family. He had an affinity for drawing and creating, using art to process the dark things he sensed in the world around him. Sound familiar? Will is also sensitive, artistic, and often felt like an outsider even among his closest friends. He uses drawing and painting to express himself, and he's incredibly perceptive about the emotional states of people around him. But it goes deeper than personality traits. Henry sensed the supernatural long before his powers fully manifested. He could feel things that others couldn't. He knew there was something wrong with his family's house. He was drawn to the darker aspects of reality in ways that disturbed the people around him. Will has shown similar abilities. He sensed the Demogorgon before anyone else in Season 1. He felt the Mind Flayer's presence throughout Season 2 before it made itself known. He's consistently been the early warning system for supernatural threats, which shouldn't be possible unless he has some kind of inherent connection to the Upside Down, beyond just being a former victim. There's also the question of why the government covered up Will's disappearance so aggressively. They faked his death. They planted a body in the quarry. They went to extraordinary lengths to make everyone believe Will had drowned, even though they must have known he was actually in the Upside Down. If Will was just an ordinary kid who got unlucky, why bother with such an elaborate cover-up? The government already had systems in place for dismissing upside-down incidents. They could have just claimed he ran away or got lost in the woods. But instead, they staged an entire death. The theory is that Dr. Brenner and his team recognized something in Will. Maybe they detected unusual readings. Maybe they knew he had latent abilities similar to the children from the Hawkins lab. Whatever the reason, they wanted to control the narrative around his disappearance because they planned to study him if he ever returned. And he did return. Changed. Connected to the Upside Down in ways that made him valuable for their research. Season 2 heavily featured Will's time at the lab, with Brenner's successor running tests on him, monitoring his episodes, trying to understand the nature of his possession. They weren't just helping him. They were gathering data. They were studying the connection between the Upside Down and a human host, which is exactly the kind of research Brenner would have prioritized. All of this points to Will being far more important than just a victim who got lucky. He might actually have powers similar to 11 and the other lab children, just dormant or suppressed. His connection to the Upside Down might not be a curse, but an ability he hasn't learned to control yet. Noah Schnapp's comments about Will being central to the finale support this. He said that Will's involvement in Season 5 is massive, that his character arc comes full circle, and that the story genuinely began and ends with him. That's not the kind of thing you say about a supporting character. That's the kind of thing you say about someone who's going to play a pivotal role in the final confrontation. Whether Will is revealed to have powers, whether Vecna has been grooming him as a successor, or whether his connection to the upside down makes him the key to closing it forever, one thing is crystal clear. Will Byers is not just the kid who got lost, he's the foundation of everything that's happened. And whatever Vecna has planned for him in Season 5, it's been in motion since that night in 1983. That's not random, that's calculated. But Will's not the only character whose fate looks properly grim. Let's talk about the one death theory that would absolutely devastate the entire fan base. I'm not going to lie, this theory breaks my heart just thinking about it. 11 might not survive Season 5, and the evidence supporting this is way more compelling than I'd like to admit. The theory centers on one pretty unsettling idea. 11 didn't just open the gate to the upside down back in 1983, she created the entire dimension. According to a really popular Reddit theory that's gained loads of traction, when Elle banished Henry Creel into the void during their psychic showdown at Hawkins' lab, her rage and power literally shaped the upside down into existence. It didn't exist before that moment, at least not in the form we know. It was just a chaotic, primordial wasteland. But when 11 tore open reality and sent Vecna through, her emotions and energy moulded that wasteland into a twisted mirror of Hawkins, frozen forever at the exact moment she made contact with the Demogorgon in 1983. Think about how the upside down looks. It's not just another dimension, it's specifically Hawkins. Down to the wallpaper in houses, the layout of streets, even the arcade machines in the palace. But it's all stuck in 1983, like a photograph that never ages. Nothing changes, nothing grows. It's a snapshot of Hawkins preserved in decay. Why would the upside down be modelled so precisely after one specific town at one specific moment in time? The theory suggests it's because the dimension was created by someone with an intimate knowledge of that place, someone whose power was fueled by memory and emotion, someone like 11. If this is true, and loads of fans are convinced it is, then 11 isn't just connected to the upside down. She's the source of it. She's the battery that keeps it running. She's the reason gates can open at all. The Reddit theory puts it pretty bluntly. As long as she stays, a gate will continue to open. 11 is like a D&D sorcerer, a living conduit between worlds. Her very existence creates instability between dimensions. She's different, on a fundamental level, and as long as she remains in the normal world, the upside down will keep trying to merge with it. This explains why Vecna has been so obsessed with her specifically. It's not just because she's powerful, though she absolutely is. It's because she's the key to everything. She created his prison, and she's also the thing keeping that prison connected to the world he wants to conquer. He can't fully invade Hawkins without her presence maintaining the gates, but he also can't be free of the upside down without dealing with her first. The implications of this are absolutely devastating. Because if 11 is the anchor, if she's the thing tethering the upside down to reality, then the only way to permanently close the gates and save the world is for her to leave, either by dying or by going somewhere the connection can be severed. Either way, she can't stay in Hawkins. She can't have a normal life with Mike and her friends. She can't grow up and become the person she's always wanted to be. Her very existence is the problem. Now, the finale episode is titled The Right Side Up, which has sparked loads of debate about what it actually means. Some fans are taking it as confirmation of a happy ending. The right side up just refers to the normal world, and the title means our heroes successfully defeat Vecna and restore things to how they should be. Everyone lives, Vecna dies, roll credits. But others, and I'd say the evidence supports this interpretation more, think the right side up means something way more complex. It could refer to 11 transforming the upside down itself, using her power not to destroy the dimension, but to reshape it, to turn it from a nightmare realm into something harmless, or even beautiful, a paradise instead of a hell. But that would require her to stay there, to become the ruler or guardian of that transformed dimension, to sacrifice her place in the normal world to ensure the upside down never threatens anyone again. Some theories go even darker and suggest she'll have to die to close the connection permanently. That her death is the only way to sever the link between worlds completely. It's the ultimate sacrifice. The girl who was created in a lab, who never got to have a childhood, who fought so hard to protect the people she loves, having to give up her life to save them one last time. To be honest, I really hope this isn't how it ends. But narratively, it makes a disturbing amount of sense. Stranger Things has always borrowed heavily from stories like E.T. and other 80s films about childhood and loss. And one of the most iconic endings in that era was the bittersweet goodbye. The hero saves the day, but can't stay. The friend goes home, the magic ends, life moves on, and you're left with memories and the knowledge that some things are too special to last forever. 11 dying or leaving permanently would be absolutely heartbreaking, but it would also feel true to the story's roots. It would give the finale real stakes and emotional weight instead of just being another everyone's fine and nothing meaningful was risked ending. There's also a really interesting parallel to Harry Potter that multiple fans have pointed out. Millie Bobby Brown herself has mentioned in interviews that she sees similarities between 11 and Harry. Both are orphans with tragic pasts who discover they have extraordinary abilities. Both are hunted by dark forces. Both become symbols of hope for the people around them. In Harry Potter, Harry walks willingly to his death to save his friends, offering himself as a sacrifice. He's the final Horcrux, the unintentional anchor keeping Voldemort alive, and he has to die for Voldemort to be truly vulnerable. But the story finds a way to bring him back, to let him survive his sacrifice and live the life he earned. The question is whether Stranger Things will follow that same path or go darker. Will 11 walk into the Upside Down, knowing she might not come back, only to somehow survive? Or will the Duffers commit to the tragedy and let her sacrifice be permanent? Fans have also pointed out a quote from one of the cast members, I think it was Maya Hawke, who said in an interview that she thinks one of the main characters needs to die for the finale to have real impact. Gaten Matarazzo said something similar. Even Millie Bobby Brown has hinted that she'd be okay with 11 dying if it served the story. That's pretty telling. The actors themselves recognise that the show has kept its core cast remarkably safe across 4 seasons. Supporting characters die, sometimes beloved ones like Eddie or Bob or Alexei, but the main group has stayed intact. For a show about kids fighting interdimensional monsters and government conspiracies, the survival rate has been unrealistically high. Season 5 needs to change that if it wants to stick the landing. And 11 dying would hit harder than any other possible death because most people genuinely don't believe the Duffers would actually do it. She's the face of the show. She's the character on all the posters. Killing her would be bold, unexpected, and emotionally devastating in exactly the way a final season should be. There's another really dark layer to this theory as well. Remember Max's state at the end of season 4? She's in a coma, her mind seemingly trapped or destroyed by Vecna. 11 tried to bring her back, and Max's heart started beating again, but her consciousness never returned. Some theories suggest that the final battle will involve Vecna possessing Max's body, using her as a vessel to fight 11 directly. Imagine that scenario. 11's best friend, someone she saved once already, being used as a weapon against her. 11 having to choose between killing Max to stop Vecna or letting Vecna win to spare her friend. If 11 has to kill Max, even accidentally, even as a necessary evil to defeat Vecna, that trauma on top of everything else she's endured would be unbearable. It would make her potential death or departure feel less like a tragedy and more like a mercy, like she's finally able to rest after carrying too much pain for too long. I'd say the chances of 11 dying or permanently leaving are probably around 50-50 at this point. The evidence is there. The thematic setup is there. The actors seem prepared for it. And the Duffers have made it pretty clear that season 5 won't pull its punches. Stranger Things started with a girl who could barely speak, who'd been tortured, and experimented on her entire life, finding a family and a purpose. It would be properly tragic if it ended with that same girl having to leave that family behind to keep them safe. But it would also feel earned. It would honour her journey while delivering the kind of gut-punch ending that people remember decades later. We'll just have to wait and see if the Duffers have the courage to actually do it. Speaking of characters in terrible situations, Max's fate might be even worse than death. Her body's here, but her mind might be trapped somewhere far darker. Now let's talk about Max, because her situation might be even worse than death. At the end of Season 4, Max was basically destroyed by Vecna. He broke her bones, blinded her, and killed her, even if just for a minute or two, before 11 managed to restart her heart. Max's body is alive, technically. She's breathing. Her heart's beating. But when 11 went searching for Max's consciousness, trying to find her mind so she could help her wake up, she found nothing. Just emptiness. Max isn't there anymore. The most popular theory, and honestly the most terrifying one, is that Max's consciousness is trapped inside Vecna's mind. Her body might be in a hospital bed in Hawkins, but her soul is wandering through the psychic wasteland of the Upside Down, held captive in Vecna's mental prison along with all his other victims. Think about what that actually means. Max isn't sleeping. She's not peacefully unconscious. She's aware, trapped, experiencing God knows what kind of psychological torture in a realm made of nightmares and trauma. She might be reliving her worst memories on loop. She might be surrounded by the screaming minds of everyone Vecna has ever killed. She might be completely alone in an endless void, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but exist in that horror. That's not mercy. That's a fate worse than anything the show has depicted so far. But the theory gets even darker. Some fans believe that Vecna isn't just keeping Max's consciousness hostage for fun. He's planning to use her. Specifically, he's going to take over her brain-dead body and use it as a vessel for the final confrontation with 11. Imagine that scenario playing out. 11 and her friends finally track Vecna down for the last battle. They're ready. They've trained. They've prepared. And then Vecna shows up wearing Max's face, speaking with Max's voice, moving in Max's body. Fighting him means fighting their friend. Killing him means killing her. The theory suggests that the climax of the entire series will be 11 versus Vecna as Max. A psychic battle between the two most powerful beings in the show. But one of them is puppeting the body of 11's best friend. 11 would have to make an impossible choice. Let Vecna win to keep Max's body alive, or destroy them both to save everyone else. You really have to feel for Max in all this. She's been the sacrificial lamb so many times already. Her stepbrother Billy was possessed and killed in Season 3, leaving her with loads of guilt and trauma. Season 4 put her through absolute hell, making her Vecna's target specifically because of her grief and depression. She barely survived that encounter, and even her survival came at the cost of her sight, her mobility, and apparently her consciousness. And now the theory suggests she's going to be used one more time, turned into a weapon against the people trying to save her. If this happens, and I reckon there's a pretty solid chance it will, the emotional devastation is going to be off the charts. Max has been through so much already that turning her into Vecna's puppet feels almost gratuitously cruel, but it also fits the pattern of the show, constantly putting its characters through worse and worse situations as the stakes escalate. There's another layer to this theory that makes it even more compelling. At the end of Season 4, when the gang regroups and sees the gates torn open across Hawkins, Lucas is sitting at Max's bedside, holding her hand, talking to her, even though she can't respond. He's devastated. He watched her die. He held her while she was breaking apart. And even though 11 brought her back, Lucas knows something's wrong. Max isn't really there anymore. Season 5 will probably feature Lucas trying desperately to reach Max, to bring her back somehow. And if the theory is true, his efforts might actually work, but not in the way he hopes. Max might wake up, but it won't be Max anymore. It'll be Vecna, pretending to be her, using Lucas's love and desperation as a way to infiltrate the group. That would be absolutely brutal to watch. Some fans have drawn comparisons to Inception, suggesting that Season 5 might feature 11 diving into Vecna's mind to rescue Max directly. A psychic battle fought in a mental landscape where the normal rules don't apply. 11 navigating through layers of Vecna's consciousness, fighting through his defenses, trying to find where he's keeping Max's mind imprisoned. It's a brilliant concept, and it would give the final season a chance to explore the Upside Down and Vecna's powers in a completely new way. Not just physically fighting monsters, but mentally battling through a surreal nightmare realm where thoughts become reality and trauma takes physical form. Imagine 11 walking through a twisted version of Hawkins inside Vecna's head, seeing all the people he's killed, all the victims he's consumed, all the darkness he's accumulated over decades of evil. And somewhere in that horror, she has to find Max and pull her out before Vecna can stop her. The visual potential alone is staggering, and it would finally give Max's character arc some kind of resolution, even if that resolution is tragic. Because let's be honest, there's a real chance Max doesn't make it out of this. Even if 11 succeeds in finding her consciousness, even if she manages to free Max from Vecna's control, the damage might be too severe. Max's body is already broken. Her mind has been through unimaginable trauma. Putting her back together might not be possible, or it might require a sacrifice so great that Max herself chooses not to come back. Some theories even suggest that Max will help 11 defeat Vecna from the inside, using her position as a captive consciousness to sabotage him at a critical moment. A final act of defiance and heroism that costs her everything but saves everyone else. Either way, Max's story is heading somewhere properly dark. Make sure you've got that tissue box nearby, because if even half of these theories come true, her scenes are going to wreck us. Since we're on the topic of people who might be puppets for Vecna, there's one theory about Will that takes everything we just discussed and makes it even more disturbing. What's absolutely terrifying about Will's role in Season 5 is that he might not be himself anymore, and the evidence for this is hiding in plain sight in the official trailer. In the Season 5 teaser, there's a brief shot of Vecna with a completely new appearance. He's covered in these spiked, thorny protrusions, and his face is obscured, almost unrecognizable compared to the burned, damaged version we saw at the end of Season 4. At first glance, it looks like he's regenerated or evolved into some kind of final form. But fans who've analysed every frame of that trailer notice something really unsettling. There's another shot, separate from the Vecna footage, showing Will Byers with his face covered in vine-like tendrils. Dark, thorny growths that look almost identical to Vecna's new appearance. Will's eyes are visible, but the rest of his face is obscured by these organic twisted vines that seem to be growing out of his skin or wrapping around him. The theory is that these aren't two different scenes. They're the same thing. Vecna isn't regenerating, he's inhabiting Will's body. Think about the state Vecna was in at the end of Season 4. Nancy, Steve and Robin set him on fire, and Nancy unloaded multiple rounds into him at point-blank range. Then he fell several stories out of a window. He survived, obviously, because he's stupidly powerful, but the damage was severe. His body was charred, broken, barely functional, and despite having access to the Upside Down's resources and his own considerable abilities, he seemingly hasn't fully healed. What if he can't? What if the combination of Eleven's attack in 1979 and the physical trauma from Season 4 has left him unable to regenerate properly? What if his body is failing, and the only way he can continue is by taking over someone else? Enter Will Byers, who's been psychically connected to Vecna since the very first episode, the perfect host, the perfect vessel, the perfect anchor to the real world that Vecna has been cultivating for years. Back in Season 2, Will was possessed by the Mind Flayer, which we now know was always controlled by Vecna. Will acted as a spy for the Mind Flayer, feeding it information about Hopper's plans, about the tunnels, about how the humans were trying to fight back. It was a trial run. Vecna learning how to control a human host, how to see through their eyes, how to manipulate their actions while keeping their consciousness suppressed enough that the possession wouldn't be immediately obvious. That possession ended with the exorcism scene, with Joyce and Jonathan blasting Will with heat to drive out the Mind Flayer's influence. But what if that didn't fully work? What if Vecna left a piece of himself behind? A tiny fragment embedded so deep in Will's mind that nobody could detect it? A backdoor, ready to be used when the time was right. Now, with the gates torn open across Hawkins and Vecna's physical body, damaged beyond quick repair, that time has come. Vecna needs Will one last time. Not just to spy, not just to sense the upside down, but to become him, to wear his face, to use his body as a new vessel for the final confrontation with 11. The trailer shows Vecna holding Will aloft at one point, whispering something we can't quite hear. Fans who've enhanced the audio think he's saying, "You're going to help me." Not a question, not a request, a statement of fact. Because Will doesn't have a choice. The connection has always been there, and now Vecna is calling in the debt. Noah Schnapp has been pretty vocal about how important Will is to Season 5. He said in multiple interviews that the show started with Will's disappearance, so it makes sense that it would end with Will as well. He's also mentioned that watching the final episodes made him cry, and that Will's arc in Season 5 is massive. That's not the kind of thing you say about a character who's just going to provide emotional support from the sidelines. That's the kind of thing you say about a character whose fate determines the outcome of everything. There's also this really compelling piece of foreshadowing from Season 2 that most people missed. In one of Will's classes, the teacher is discussing Phineas Gage, a real historical figure who survived a traumatic brain injury in 1848. A metal rod went straight through Gage's skull, destroying his left eye and a portion of his frontal lobe. He survived but was forever changed by the experience. During this lesson, the camera lingers on Will for an unusually long time. It's not just a quick shot. It's deliberate, pointed, like the show is trying to draw a parallel between Phineas Gage and Will Byers. At the time, fans thought it was just commentary on Will's trauma from the upside down, how he'd been through something that changed him fundamentally. But looking back with the Season 5 theories in mind, it might be foreshadowing something way more literal. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, there's an artifact called the Eye of Vecna. It's one of the most powerful and dangerous items in the game, created when Vecna was betrayed and dismembered by his Lieutenant Cass. Vecna's body was destroyed, but certain parts of him survived as cursed artifacts. The Eye of Vecna, specifically, can be implanted into a person's skull in place of their own eye, granting them incredible power, but also slowly corrupting them and turning them into a vessel for Vecna's will. Now look at the promotional material for Season 5. Multiple images show both Vecna and Will with their right eyes obscured or damaged. It's subtle, but it's there. Vecna's right eye is hidden behind the spiked growths. Will's right eye is covered by the vines in that trailer shot. The symmetry is intentional. The theory is that Will is going to lose his right eye, either literally or metaphorically, as part of Vecna's possession. That the Eye of Vecna isn't just a D&D reference, but an actual plot point. Will might have to sacrifice his eye, his sight, perhaps even a part of his identity, in order to defeat Vecna. Or Vecna might take it from him as part of the possession ritual. Either way, the foreshadowing from Season 2 with Phineas Gage, combined with the D&D lore about the Eye of Vecna, combined with the visual evidence from the trailer, all points to something really dark happening to Will's physical body as well as his mind. What makes this theory even more plausible is how closely Will's story parallels Henry Creel's. We've already established that both were sensitive, artistic kids who sensed the supernatural. But the parallels go deeper. Henry was isolated, misunderstood, targeted by forces that wanted to use his power. His family didn't understand him. The world felt hostile. He found refuge in his art and in exploring the darker corners of reality. Will experienced all of that too. He's always been the quieter member of his friend group, the one who feels things more deeply, the one who struggled to fit in even among his closest friends. His family has been fractured and complicated. His father abandoned them. His mother is loving but overwhelmed. His brother cares but doesn't always understand. Will has spent most of the series feeling like an outsider, even in his own life. Vecna, who was once Henry Creel, probably sees himself in Will, not as a victim, but as a kindred spirit, someone with potential, someone who could understand the appeal of the Upside Down's power, someone who could be moulded into a successor, or failing that, a perfect host. The government's interest in Will also makes way more sense if he has latent abilities similar to Eleven and the other lab children. Dr. Brenner was obsessed with finding and cataloguing people with psychic potential. If Will showed signs of having abilities, even dormant ones, Brenner would have absolutely prioritized studying him. The cover-up of Will's disappearance, the fake body, the intense monitoring after his return, it all points to the government recognizing that Will was valuable for reasons beyond just being a victim of the Upside Down. By using Will as a vessel, Vecna gains several advantages. First, he gets a new body that isn't damaged or failing. Second, he gets someone who's already connected to the Upside Down, making the possession easier and more stable. Third, and this is the really twisted part, he gets access to Eleven's inner circle. Will is Mike's best friend. He's Jonathan's brother. He's close to Eleven. By wearing Will's face, Vecna can get physically close to Eleven in a way he couldn't otherwise. He can manipulate her emotions. He can use her love for Will against her. Imagine the scene. Eleven is preparing for the final confrontation with Vecna. She's ready to face him, to end this once and for all. And then Will walks into the room. Except it's not Will anymore. It's Vecna, looking at her through Will's eyes, speaking with Will's voice, using her friend's body as a shield. How do you fight that? How do you destroy Vecna without destroying Will in the process? Some theories suggest that Will himself will have to make the choice, that he'll still be conscious inside his own body, trapped like Max but aware of what's happening, and he'll have to help Eleven kill him, guide her on how to separate Vecna from his mind, even if it means he doesn't survive the process. A final act of sacrifice from the character whose disappearance started everything. Other theories are slightly less grim, suggesting that Will won't be fully possessed, but will instead have to battle Vecna for control of his own body throughout the final season. Moments where Will breaks through, where he's able to resist or sabotage Vecna's plans from the inside. A psychological war waged inside one person's mind, while the physical battle rages outside. Fun fact, the Duffer Brothers have mentioned in interviews that Season 5 will answer questions about the Upside Down's origins and about Will's connection to everything. They've specifically said that Will's story is central to understanding the bigger picture. That's pretty huge. It means all the theories about Will having powers, about his connection to Vecna being more than just circumstantial, about him being groomed as a vessel, they're all at least partially on the right track. Whether Vecna fully possesses Will, partially controls him, or just uses him as a psychic anchor, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Will Byers is not going to have a happy ending. He's been targeted since the very first episode, marked by forces beyond his control, and now it's all coming to a head in the worst possible way. The story started with Will vanishing into the Upside Down. It's probably going to end with him having to make an impossible choice about how much of himself he's willing to sacrifice to close that door forever. But Vecna might not be working alone in his plans for a final assault. There's a theory about Eddie's return that manages to be both hopeful and absolutely horrifying at the same time. Eddie Munson's death in Season 4 was one of those moments that absolutely gutted the fan base. He went out a hero, playing Master of Puppets on his guitar to distract the Demobats, while the others infiltrated Vecna's lair. He bought them time, bought them a chance, and paid for it with his life. Those Demobats swarmed him, tearing him apart, and he died in Dustin's arms, telling him he was finally brave. It was a brilliant character arc. From the town pariah accused of murder to a genuine hero who sacrificed himself to save people who'd never appreciate what he did. Proper tragic, and most fans assumed that was the end of Eddie's story, but Reddit refuses to let him go. And honestly, the theory about how he might return is brilliant, even if it's properly dark. The theory centers on a Dungeons & Dragons character called Kaz the Betrayer. In D&D lore, Kaz was Vecna's most trusted lieutenant, a vampire warrior who served Vecna loyally for years. Vecna gave Kaz a powerful sword and elevated him to a position of authority within his dark empire. But eventually, Kaz betrayed Vecna, turning on his master and battling him in a confrontation so violent that it destroyed them both. Vecna's body was obliterated, with only certain parts surviving as cursed artifacts. Kaz died as well, but was resurrected as a half-vampire, bound to wander the world forever. Now here's where it gets interesting. In the very first episode of Season 4, during the Hellfire Club's D&D campaign, Eddie reveals a twist in the game. The party thought they'd killed Vecna, but Eddie announces that Vecna survived. Mike immediately responds with, "He was killed by Kaz." At the time it seemed like just flavor dialogue, establishing the character's knowledge of D&D lore. But looking back with the full context of Season 4 and the theories about Season 5, that line feels like massive foreshadowing. The Duffers don't waste dialogue, especially not in their opening episodes. If they had Mike specifically mention Kaz killing Vecna, there's probably a reason. The parallels between Eddie and Kaz are stacking up in ways that feel too deliberate to be coincidental. Eddie died from Demobat bites, literally torn apart by bat-like creatures. In the D&D lore, Kaz died in battle, but was resurrected with vampiric traits, including an affinity for bats and the ability to transform into one. The method of death matches. Eddie also wielded a makeshift shield and a spear during his final stand, fighting like a warrior defending his position. Kaz is specifically described in D&D as wielding a sword and shield, a warrior who fought on the front lines rather than using magic or stealth. The visual parallel is there. And then there's the emotional core of the theory. Kaz wasn't just any lieutenant. He was Vecna's trusted servant who eventually turned against him. If Eddie returns as a resurrected thrall of Vecna, he'd be in the perfect position to betray his master from the inside, just like Kaz did in the game. He'd be Vecna's weapon, his vampire servant, his eyes and ears in the real world, but Eddie's core personality, his loyalty to his friends, and his fundamental decency would still be buried somewhere inside. And at the critical moment, he could break free of Vecna's control and strike the killing blow. Imagine the scene. Vecna is moments away from victory. 11 is exhausted, the group is scattered, everything looks hopeless, and then Eddie, who everyone thought was dead, who Vecna has been using as a servant, turns on him, uses the very power Vecna gave him to destroy him instead. A final act of defiance and heroism that mirrors his sacrifice in Season 4, but on an even larger scale. It would be heartbreaking and triumphant at the same time. Eddie gets his encore, gets to be the hero one more time, but the cost is that he's been transformed into something monstrous. Even if he defeats Vecna, he can't go back to being human. He'd have to leave Hawkins, leave Dustin, disappear into the world as this half-vampire creature, forever marked by what he had to do. The Duffers have a pattern with beloved supporting characters: Barb, Bob, Alexei, Billy, Eddie. They introduce someone the audience falls in love with, give them meaningful relationships with the main cast, and then kill them for emotional impact. It works because those deaths hurt. They're not main characters, so the show can afford to lose them, but they're developed enough that their absence is felt. Eddie's death in season 4 followed that formula perfectly, but bringing him back, even in a corrupted form, would subvert it in a way that's both satisfying and tragic. It would give the fans who desperately want Eddie to return exactly what they're asking for, but with a massive twist that makes the return more painful than his original death. Dustin would be thrilled to see Eddie alive, only to realise his friend has been turned into a monster. He'd have to watch Eddie struggle against Vecna's control, never knowing if the person he's talking to is really Eddie or just Vecna wearing his face. And if Eddie does break free and help them win, Dustin would have to say goodbye all over again, this time knowing Eddie is alive out there somewhere, but can never come home. That's the kind of emotional complexity the Duffers love. Bittersweet victories. Heroes who win but lose something irreplaceable in the process. Hope tinged with grief. Whether this theory actually plays out or not, the groundwork is absolutely there. The D&D references were deliberate. The method of Eddie's death matches Cass's resurrection. The emotional potential is massive. And Joseph Quinn, who played Eddie, has been notably cagey in interviews when asked if he's returning for season 5. Neither confirming nor denying anything. If Eddie does come back as Cass, it'll be one of the most talked about twists in the show's history. If he doesn't, if his death in season 4 really was final, then at least the theory gave fans something to hope for while we wait for the final season. Either way, the fact that so many people are invested in this idea shows how much Eddie meant to viewers. He was only around for one season, but his impact was massive, and the thought of him getting one more moment, one more chance to be the hero, even in a corrupted form, is something loads of fans are holding on to. The Duffers know what they're doing. They know how much people loved Eddie, and if they bring him back, even as a tragic, monstrous version of himself, it'll hurt in exactly the right way. But Eddie might not be the only one coming back from the dead. There's a whole category of victims who could potentially rise again, and the implications are absolutely horrifying. Here's a theory that turns season 5 into something closer to a zombie apocalypse, and it's based on a precedent the show has already established. Henry Creel, who became Vecna, was supposedly killed by Eleven back in 1979. She attacked him with her powers, tore open a gate to another dimension, and sent him tumbling through into the void. Everyone at Hawkins' lab assumed he was dead. Brenner certainly acted like the problem was solved, even if he kept the incident classified. But Henry survived. He landed in the Upside Down, adapted to it, transformed himself into Vecna, and spent decades planning his revenge. If Henry could survive what should have been certain death, if he could persist in the Upside Down for years, then the same might be true for everyone else Vecna has killed. Every single victim from every season could potentially still be alive in some form, suspended in that nightmare realm, waiting to be used. The theory is that Vecna has been keeping his victims alive, or at least preserving their bodies and minds in a state that allows for resurrection. Not out of mercy or hesitation, but because they're resources, weapons he can deploy when the time is right, an army of the dead that he can raise to fight against the living during the final battle. Think about everyone who's died because of the Upside Down across the show's run. Barb in season 1, pulled into the pool and cocooned. Numerous townspeople from season 2 who were caught in the tunnels or possessed by the Mind Flayer. Billy in season 3, killed after being used as the Mind Flayer's vessel. Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, and the other named victims from season 4 who Vecna cursed and killed to open the gates. Loads of unnamed victims from the various attacks and incidents over the years. Now imagine all of them rising when Vecna calls, shambling out of the Upside Down through the open gates, their bodies twisted and corrupted by years of exposure to that toxic environment. Not quite alive, not quite dead, but animated by Vecna's will and commanded to attack their former friends and family. It would transform Hawkins into a war zone, the living versus the resurrected. And the psychological horror of that scenario is intense. How do you fight someone who used to be your friend? How do you destroy what's left of Barb when she's stumbling towards you with her eyes blank and her movements jerky, controlled by Vecna like a puppet? The Duffers have cited classic horror films as inspirations throughout the show's run. Day of the Dead specifically, which features reanimated corpses used as test subjects and weapons. The idea of the dead rising to fight against the living fits perfectly with that 80s horror aesthetic the show loves so much, and it raises the stakes in a way that previous seasons haven't quite managed. In Season 1, the threat was localized, one Demogorgon hunting specific people. Season 2 expanded it with the Mind Flayer and the tunnels, but it was still mostly contained. Season 3 brought the battle to Starcourt Mall, a public space, but the danger was still limited to one night and one location. Season 4 ended with multiple gates open and the Upside Down bleeding into Hawkins, but the actual casualties shown on screen were relatively low. Season 5 needs to top all of that. And what's more apocalyptic than the dead rising to attack the living? What's more final season appropriate than facing not just new monsters, but also everyone who's been lost along the way? Some fans have pointed out that this would also give closure to characters like Barb, whose death in Season 1 felt anticlimactic, and whose absence was mourned by viewers more than by anyone in the show itself. If Barb returns, even as a corrupted version of herself, Nancy would have to confront that loss in a direct, visceral way. She'd have to fight her friend, put her down permanently, and finally process the guilt she's been carrying since Season 1. The same would be true for the other deaths. Max would potentially face Billy, the stepbrother who abused her, but also tried to protect her in the end. Lucas and Dustin would face Patrick and other classmates. Joyce might face Bob, the sweet man who loved her and died trying to help. Every character would be forced to confront their past losses, made literal and monstrous. Let's be honest, it's messed up. The idea of being kept alive in the Upside Down, suspended in some kind of stasis, only to be resurrected and forced to fight for the creature that killed you in the first place. No agency, no choice, just existing as a weapon until you're destroyed again, this time permanently. But that's the kind of twisted cruelty that fits Vecna's character. He doesn't just kill people. He consumes them, traps them in their worst memories, uses their trauma against them. Keeping them as puppets for a final assault against their loved ones is exactly the sort of psychological warfare he'd employ. Whether this theory actually happens or if it's just fans, taking the zombie apocalypse aesthetic to its logical conclusion, the possibility has been raised. And with multiple gates open across Hawkins, with the Upside Down merged with the real world in ways we've never seen before, the idea of previous victims returning isn't that far-fetched. If Season 5 does go this route, it'll be absolutely brutal. The emotional weight of killing corrupted versions of beloved characters, combined with the physical threat of an army of the undead, would push the show into proper horror territory. No more holding back. No more keeping the violence mostly off-screen. Just full confrontation with death and loss in the most visceral way possible. Now there's a theory about a monster that makes all these undead victims look small by comparison, because Vecna himself might not even be the final boss. What's wild about the final season is that Vecna might not even be the biggest threat. There's evidence hidden in plain sight suggesting something far larger and more dangerous is coming, and it all starts with a painting. Back in Season 4, Will created a painting that he gave to Mike during a really emotional moment in the van. The painting showed the original party, their D&D characters fighting together against a massive dragon. At the time, it seemed like a sweet symbolic gesture about friendship and unity. Mike even got a bit choked up about it, but fans who know their Dungeons and Dragons lore immediately noticed the specific type of dragon Will depicted. It's not just any dragon, it's a 3-headed red dragon, massive in scale, towering over the tiny figures of the heroes below. And in D&D, there are very specific legendary creatures that match that description. The most popular candidate is Boris, one of the most powerful entities in Dungeons and Dragons mythology. Boris is described as a colossal red dragon, sometimes called the Dragon of Tyr, who possesses reality-warping abilities and commands armies of lesser creatures. He's not just a monster, he's a force of nature, something so powerful that defeating him requires the combined efforts of multiple legendary heroes working in perfect coordination. Other theories suggest it could be Tiamat, the five-headed dragon goddess of evil, though Will's painting clearly shows 3 heads, or the Thessal Hydra, which was actually mentioned back in Season 1 during the boys' D&D campaign, a multi-headed serpent creature with regenerating abilities, or even the Tarask, which in D&D is basically an unkillable engine of destruction that can level entire cities. Whatever the specific creature ends up being, the key point is that Will's painting appears to be foreshadowing something way bigger than anything the party has faced before. And there are other hints supporting this theory beyond just the painting itself. Nancy's vision in Season 4, when Vecna showed her the future, depicted Hawkins completely destroyed. She saw the town torn apart, consumed by the Upside Down, with creatures pouring through in numbers that would be impossible for the main cast to fight alone. The scale of the destruction she witnessed suggests something beyond just Vecna and his demogorgons. It suggests a full-scale apocalypse driven by multiple massive threats. The Duffer Brothers have also made comments in interviews about Season 5 being the biggest and most ambitious yet. They've mentioned that the final battle will make everything from previous seasons look small by comparison. That's a pretty bold claim when Season 4 already featured Vecna, multiple gates, and Hawkins being torn apart by earthquakes. What could possibly be bigger than that? A 3-headed dragon emerging from the Upside Down would certainly qualify. Fun fact, in D&D campaigns, Vecna is typically a high-level threat, but not the ultimate threat. He's powerful, sure, but there are entities in that universe that make him look like a minor villain. The dragon gods, the demon princes, the primordial forces of chaos, these are the things that end campaigns and require every resource the players have gathered across dozens of sessions. If Stranger Things is following that escalation pattern, then Vecna being defeated or weakened could actually unleash something worse. Maybe he's been keeping something contained. Maybe the Upside Down has layers, with deeper, more dangerous regions that even Vecna fears. Maybe opening all those gates didn't just let Vecna's forces through. Maybe it also woke up something ancient that's been sleeping in the depths of that dimension. Will, who has the strongest connection to the Upside Down, aside from 11, might have sensed this coming. His painting wasn't just about their friendship. It was a warning, a premonition of what they'll need to face together. The fact that he depicted all of them working as a unified party suggests that defeating this dragon creature will require every single member of the group contributing their specific skills and abilities. Some fans have even suggested that Vecna himself might end up being a reluctant ally against this bigger threat, that once the dragon is unleashed, even he recognizes that it needs to be stopped or it'll consume everything, including the Upside Down itself. An enemy of my enemy situation, where 11 and Vecna have to temporarily work together to face something neither can defeat alone. That would be a proper twist, spending 4 seasons building Vecna up as the ultimate villain, only to reveal in the final season that he's just the opening act. The real threat has been dormant, waiting, gathering strength while Vecna and the humans fought their petty war. The visual potential alone is staggering. Imagine the party standing in a destroyed Hawkins, gates torn open everywhere, the sky dark and churning, and then something massive rises from the largest gate, something so big it blocks out what little light remains. 3 heads, each capable of independent thought and action, wings that create hurricane-force winds when they beat, scales that shrug off bullets and fire, a roar that shatters windows for miles. That's the kind of spectacle that ends a series. That's the kind of threat that justifies every character arc, every sacrifice, every moment of growth across 5 seasons. The kids who started out fighting a single demogorgon in 1983 now facing a literal dragon in 1987. Whether it's Boris, Tiamat, the Thessal Hydra, or something else the Duffers create specifically for the show, one thing seems increasingly likely. The final monster will be legendary in scale, and defeating it will cost more than anyone wants to pay. But the scariest theories aren't always about the monsters. Sometimes they're about the people we've grown to love, and which of them won't make it to the end. Let's talk about the question everyone's been avoiding. Who's actually going to die in Season 5? Stranger Things has maintained a pretty consistent pattern across its first 4 seasons. Supporting characters die, often beloved ones, while the core group stays remarkably intact. We've lost Barb, Bob, Alexi, Billy, and Eddie. Each death hit hard because these characters were developed enough that we cared about them, but they weren't part of the original main cast, which meant the show could afford to kill them without fundamentally changing the group dynamic. But that pattern can't hold for the final season, not if the Duffers want the finale to have real emotional impact. And they've basically confirmed as much. The Duffer brothers have described Season 5 as brutal and violent in a way that previous seasons haven't been. They've specifically said that deaths won't be for shock value, but will serve the story. That's code for yes, people are dying, and yes, it's going to hurt. Multiple cast members have echoed this sentiment in interviews. Guten Matarazzo, who plays Dustin, has said he thinks one of the kids should die to raise the stakes. Millie Bobby Brown mentioned she'd be okay with 11 dying if it made narrative sense. Maya Hawke said something similar about the need for real consequences. When the actors themselves are preparing fans for major deaths, you know something big is coming. The most popular death theory, the one that's dominated Reddit and Twitter for months, centers on Steve Harrington. And on the surface, it makes loads of sense. Steve has had one of the most remarkable character arcs in television. He started as Nancy's obnoxious boyfriend, the popular jock who cared more about his reputation than anything else. Then he got his arse handed to him by Jonathan, had his world turned upside down by interdimensional monsters, and gradually transformed into the group's unofficial babysitter and protector. By Season 4, Steve is basically everyone's favourite character. He's brave, he's caring, he's funny in a self-deprecating way, and he's shown repeatedly that he'll put himself in danger to protect the kids. His dream of having 6 little nuggets and driving them around in an RV has become this running joke that's also genuinely sweet. He wants a family. He wants normalcy. He wants a future, which is exactly why fans are convinced he's going to die. The character who wants to settle down and have kids never gets to do that in these kinds of stories. They sacrifice themselves so others can have the future they wanted. It's tragic, it's poetic, and it would absolutely devastate viewers who've watched Steve's transformation over 5 seasons. But here's the thing, that theory is almost too obvious at this point. Everyone expects Steve to die. The internet has basically manifested it into existence through sheer collective anxiety. And the Duffers know this. They're aware of what fans are predicting, and they've shown time and again that they like to subvert expectations when possible. Steve appearing relatively little in the Season 5 trailer has only intensified the death theories. There's a shot of Dustin hugging Steve with tears in his eyes, and fans have interpreted that as Dustin mourning Steve's death. But it could just as easily be relief that Steve survived something, or grief over someone else's death, or just an emotional reunion after they've been separated. My gut tells me Steve is actually safe. I think the Duffers are using him as a red herring, letting fans fixate on Steve dying so the actual death hits harder because nobody saw it coming. Jonathan Byers, on the other hand, is looking increasingly likely to not make it. Multiple fans have pointed out that Jonathan and Nancy have been given significant focus in the Season 5 promotional material, They're shown together in several shots, having what looks like serious conversations, facing danger side by side. That kind of focused attention on a relationship often precedes tragedy. Jonathan has also been sort of sidelined in recent seasons. His character arc in season 4 was mostly about lying to Nancy about his college plans and smoking weed with Argyle. He hasn't had a major storyline of his own since season 1 or 2. Giving him a heroic death would redeem that lack of focus and give his character a meaningful conclusion. There's also the narrative weight it would carry. Jonathan is Will's older brother, Joyce's son, Nancy's boyfriend. His death would affect multiple core characters in profound ways. It would force Will to step up and be strong for his mother. It would give Nancy closure on the love triangle that's been dragging on for seasons. It would push Joyce into an even darker emotional space that could drive her actions in the finale. According to leaked footage from the season 5 premiere event, Mike Wheeler survives. There's an epilogue scene showing Mike and Hopper having a conversation on a bench, which means Mike makes it to whatever comes after the main battle. That's a relief for Mike fans, though it also means everyone else is fair game. Max's fate is probably the most uncertain. She's currently in a coma, with her consciousness missing, possibly trapped inside Vecna's mind. She could wake up, she could die permanently, she could wake up only to be possessed by Vecna and forced to fight her friends. She could wake up as herself, but with severe disabilities from her injuries. There's no way to predict which direction the Duffers will take her story, but it's definitely not going to be an easy recovery. There's a theory that Holly Wheeler, Mike and Nancy's younger sister, will vanish in season 5. The second episode is titled The Vanishing of, and fans are convinced Holly's name completes that title, creating a callback to season 1's opening episode, The Vanishing of Will Byers. Holly has been essentially a background character for the entire series, but season 5 is supposedly giving her a much larger role. If she gets taken, it would force the Wheeler family to finally confront the supernatural threats that their children have been dealing with for years. Karen Wheeler, the mum, might also have a bigger role than expected. There are theories suggesting she's secretly Alice Creel, Victor Creel's daughter, who supposedly died along with the rest of the family. If that's true, Karen has been hiding in plain sight for decades, and her past connection to Vecna could become critically important. Whether that theory is accurate or not, Karen will almost certainly be pulled into the action in season 5, and her survival is far from guaranteed. Ted Wheeler, the perpetually oblivious dad, has somehow made it through 4 seasons without having any idea what his kids are actually doing. But that can't last. Season 5 will probably force Ted to step up and be an actual protective father for once. And protective fathers in these kinds of stories often don't survive their moment of heroism. Then there's Derek, a new character being introduced in season 5. His last name is apparently Turnbow, and the 3rd episode is titled The Turnbow Trap. Fans are basically unanimous that Derek is dead meat. He's the new Bob, the new Alexei, the new Eddie. A likeable supporting character introduced specifically to be killed off for emotional impact. The Duffers have a type, and Derek fits it perfectly. Vecna is obviously going to die or be defeated somehow. The show can't end with the main villain still active and threatening. But the question is what that defeat will cost and whether killing Vecna actually solves the problem or just opens the door to something worse. And then there's Will. His fate is honestly the most uncertain of anyone's. He's been positioned as central to season 5's story. Noah Schnapp has said, the show started with Will and will end with Will. That could mean he survives and gets a heroic conclusion to his arc, or it could mean he sacrifices himself to close the gates forever. His connection to the Upside Down makes him uniquely positioned to either save everyone or be consumed by the very thing that's haunted him since he was 12. In a perfect world, everyone makes it out alive and gets to have a normal life after all this is over. Steve gets his 6 nuggets. Mike and 11 end up together. Will finds happiness and acceptance. The whole group gets to grow up and move on from the trauma, but this is Stranger Things. And the Duffers have promised that Season 5 won't pull its punches. Someone's not walking away from the final battle. Probably multiple someones. And whoever it is, the loss is going to hurt in a way the show hasn't quite managed before. Stock up on tissues now. You're going to need them. Beyond individual deaths, though, there are theories about how the entire story might end, and some of them are absolutely wild in their implications. The finale episode is titled The Right Side Up, and that seemingly simple title has sparked more debate than just about anything else in the Season 5 promotional material. Because depending on how you interpret those three words, the ending could range from straightforward victory to reality-warping nightmare. The most optimistic interpretation is also the most literal. The right side up is just another name for the normal world, the dimension where the main characters live. The title means that by the end of the finale, our heroes will have successfully closed the gates, defeated Vecna, and restored Hawkins to the way it should be. The upside down stays down there. The right side up stays up here. Everything goes back to normal. Everyone lives, Vecna dies, roll credits on New Year's Eve with a hopeful note about moving forward. Some fans have latched onto this interpretation specifically because the finale airs on December 31st. They argue the Duffers wouldn't devastate viewers right before New Year's. Nobody wants to start 2026 sobbing over fictional character deaths, so the finale must have a relatively happy ending. But others think that's wishful thinking. A darker interpretation of the right side up suggests it's not describing the normal world at all. It's describing what 11 does to the upside down. The theory posits that 11 will transform the nightmare dimension itself, flipping it from a hell realm into something harmless or even beautiful. She created it when she banished Vecna, so maybe she can reshape it, turn the upside down into the right side up, through sheer force of will and power. The cost, though, would be massive. To maintain that transformation, to keep the dimension stable and non-threatening, 11 would have to stay there. She'd become the guardian or ruler of that transformed realm, sacrificing her place in the normal world to ensure the upside down never threatens anyone again. It's a happy ending for everyone except 11, who loses everything she fought for. Then there are the time loop theories, which take things in a completely different direction. These theories suggest that time itself, not Vecna, has always been the real enemy. The upside down. Being frozen at 1983 isn't just a weird quirk of the dimension. It's evidence that the upside down is feeding on the timeline, slowly eroding it, creating paradoxes and loops that trap certain events in endless repetition. According to this interpretation, Vecna's clock imagery wasn't just a creepy aesthetic choice. The clock striking 4 times, the way Vecna showed Nancy visions of both the past and the future, his overconfident dialogue about knowing what's coming, it all suggests he has some ability to perceive or manipulate time itself. He's been watching the timeline, seeing multiple versions of events, knowing outcomes before they happen. That would explain his repeated statements to the characters. You can't stop this now. You've already lost. This is the beginning of the end. He's not just being arrogant. He's seen how this plays out. He knows what's coming because he's already witnessed it from a position outside linear time. If this theory is correct, then 11's final challenge won't be to physically defeat Vecna, but to break the time loop entirely. To reset reality in a way that prevents the upside down from ever existing, or at least severs its connection to the normal world permanently. But resetting time would have consequences. Who survives might change. Relationships might be different. Some people might never have met. It would be a victory, but one that erases or alters huge portions of the timeline viewers have been following for 5 seasons. There's also a theory about the 2 dimensions merging completely. With all the gates open and Hawkins already partially consumed by the upside down, maybe the barrier between worlds collapses entirely in Season 5. The normal world and the nightmare realm fuse into a single reality, creating something new that's neither fully won nor the other. The finale would then be about the characters learning to survive in this merged dimension, where the rules are different and nothing works the way it used to. This would allow for a bittersweet ending where the threat is neutralized, but the world is forever changed. Hawkins becomes a place where the supernatural is just part of daily life. Monsters still exist, but are manageable. The Upside Down's influence is permanent, but not actively malevolent. Life goes on, just in a much stranger form than before. The Duffers have debunked one popular theory, at least. For years, fans have speculated that the entire show is just a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that the boys are playing, that the final episode would pull back to reveal Mike, Will, Lucas, and Dustin sitting around a table in Mike's basement, finishing their game, and everything we watched was their imagination. The Duffers have explicitly said this won't happen, that the stakes are real, and the show isn't pulling "it was all a dream" cop-out. Thank God, honestly. That kind of ending would be massively unsatisfying after 5 seasons of emotional investment. But there is a related theory that's even more controversial and hasn't been officially debunked. Some fans think the entire show takes place in a psychiatric ward, that all the characters are patients who've created a shared delusion about the Upside Down to cope with their various traumas. Joyce is a patient who went insane after Will died. The other characters are fellow patients who've bought into her delusion because their own realities are too painful to face. It's a deeply cynical interpretation, and most fans hate it. But it persists in certain corners of the internet, usually framed as a what if rather than a serious prediction. What's really interesting about all these theories is how they reflect different ideas about what makes a satisfying ending. Some people want closure and victory. They want to see the characters happy and safe after everything they've endured. Others want tragedy and sacrifice. They argue that a final season, without real consequences, wouldn't honour the journey or the stakes. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The Duffers have shown throughout the series that they understand bittersweet endings. They know how to make victories feel earned, while also acknowledging the cost. Season 3 ended with the Mind Flayer defeated, but Hopper seemingly dead, and the Byers family leaving Hawkins. That's the kind of ending that feels true to the show's tone. Hope mixed with grief, moving forward while carrying the weight of what was lost. Across fan sites and Reddit threads, the theories range from apocalyptic to optimistic, with loads of variations in between. Some think Hawkins will be completely destroyed, the town evacuated, the whole area quarantined forever. Others think the battle will be contained and the town will rebuild. Some believe multiple main characters will die. Others think the core group stays intact with only supporting characters lost. One theory that's gained traction suggests that even after defeating Vecna and closing the gates, a version of the Upside Down will remain. Not active, not threatening, but dormant, a shadow realm that mirrors the real world, waiting, and someone, probably Will or 11, will be able to sense it. A heartbeat under the floorboards, a hum in the static, a reminder that the threat is gone, but not erased, that monsters never really die, they just wait for the next song to play. It's a haunting image and one that fits the show's aesthetic perfectly. Stranger Things has never been about definitive victories. It's always been about ordinary people facing extraordinary horrors and finding the strength to keep going despite the scars those encounters leave behind. Speaking of characters who might play a bigger role than expected, there's one person from Eleven's past who could return to help in the final battle. Here's a character most people have probably forgotten about, but who might be super important in Season 5. Kali Prasad, also known as 8. Kali was introduced in Season 2 during Eleven's brief detour to Chicago. She was another child experimented on by Dr. Brenner at Hawkins' lab, with the number 08 tattooed on her wrist, just like 11 has 111. Kali's power is the ability to make people see things that aren't there, to create incredibly realistic hallucinations that can fool all the senses. She used this ability to track down and terrorize the people who'd wronged her during her time at the lab, creating illusions of their worst fears, or just making herself and her gang invisible to security cameras. The episode featuring Carly, the lost sister, is widely considered one of the weakest in the entire series. It pulled 11 away from the main action at a critical moment, introduced a bunch of new characters we didn't have time to care about, and ultimately didn't contribute much to the overall plot beyond giving 11 a pep talk about using her anger to fuel her powers. Most fans would rather pretend the episode didn't exist, but the character of Carly herself is actually really interesting, and there's a compelling theory about what happened to her after Season 2. Carly's hallucination powers are remarkably similar to what Vecna does. Vecna traps his victims in visions of their worst memories, making them experience trauma so vividly that their minds break under the strain. He manipulates perception, creates illusions, makes people see things that aren't real. That's essentially what Carly does, just on a smaller scale and without the murderous intent. The theory is that Vecna tracked down Carly at some point between Season 2 and Season 4 and killed her, not because she was a threat to him directly, but because he wanted her abilities. Vecna has shown throughout Season 4 that he can absorb or consume the essence of the people he kills. He takes something from them, adds their trauma and memories to his collection. What if he can also absorb their powers? If Vecna killed Carly and took her hallucination abilities, that would explain how his powers seem to have evolved beyond what we saw from young Henry in the flashbacks. Henry could move things with his mind and sense emotions, but his ability to trap people in personalized nightmare visions, to make them see and experience things so real they can't tell the difference from reality, that feels like an enhancement, an upgrade he gained by consuming 8. Reddit users have pointed out that we never see Carly again after Season 2. She's not mentioned. 11 doesn't try to contact her. There's no indication of what happened to her or her punk gang in Chicago. For a character who was supposedly important enough to get her own spotlight episode, the complete absence of any follow-up is suspicious. The counter-argument, which honestly makes more sense narratively, is that Carly will return in Season 5 to help 11 in the final battle. That the reason she hasn't appeared is because the Duffers are saving her for maximum impact. 11 fighting Vecna. Alone nearly killed her in Season 4. She's powerful, but Vecna is more experienced and arguably stronger. She needs backup. She needs someone who understands what it's like to have been experimented on, who has complementary abilities, who can fight on the same psychic battlefield. Carly creating hallucinations to confuse Vecna while 11 attacks him directly could be a brilliant strategy. Or Carly could use her powers to shield the group from Vecna's visions, giving them protection while they execute whatever plan they've devised. Her abilities would be incredibly useful in the fight, and bringing her back would redeem that Season 2 subplot by proving it wasn't just filler, but set up for something important. There's also the possibility that other numbered children from the lab could appear. We know there were at least 10 others besides 11 and Carly. Some died in the massacre young Henry committed, but others might have escaped or been elsewhere when it happened. Brenner was running experiments for years. The full extent of his program has never been revealed. Season 5 could introduce more survivors, each with their own unique abilities, all converging on Hawkins for the final confrontation. 11 assembling a team of psychic warriors to face Vecna would be properly epic. It would also balance the scales a bit, making the fight feel less like one exhausted teenager against an ancient evil, and more like a coordinated assault by people who understand the nature of the threat. Whether Carly returns as an ally, whether she's already dead and her powers were absorbed by Vecna, or whether she's just been written out of the story entirely, one thing is clear. 11 is going to need all the help she can get. Fighting Vecna isn't something she can do alone, and recognizing that, accepting support from others, would be a fitting conclusion to her character arc about learning to trust and rely on the people who care about her. But there's one more fan favourite whose fate has dominated Season 5 speculation, and the theory about what might happen to him is both hopeful and heartbreaking. I've gotten to this point in the theories and I'm just now realising I haven't properly talked about Steve Harrington, which feels wrong. Considering how much speculation surrounds his fate, Steve has become one of those characters that transcends the show itself. He started as the stereotypical popular jock, the guy dating Nancy who cared more about his hair than anything meaningful. Then Jonathan beat him up, Demogorgons invaded his life, and something shifted. By Season 2, Steve was babysitting Dustin and fighting interdimensional monsters with a nail bat. By Season 3, he was working at Scoops Ahoy and forming an unlikely friendship with Robin. By Season 4, he was diving into cursed lakes and getting dragged into the Upside Down by Demobats. His character development has been brilliant, and his dream of having 6 little nuggets, driving them around in an RV, being the dad he never really had, it's become this sweet running joke that also reveals genuine depth. Steve wants normalcy. He wants a family. He wants to matter to people in a way that doesn't involve fighting monsters, which is exactly why fans are convinced he's going to die. The Season 5 trailer shows very little of Steve. Joe Keery barely appears in the footage, and the Duffer Brothers have confirmed they used clips from all 8 episodes. If Steve had a major role throughout the season, you'd expect more of him in the promotional material. His absence has been noted and worried over by basically everyone who cares about the character. There's also that shot of Dustin hugging Steve with tears streaming down his face. Dustin looks absolutely devastated, and fans have interpreted this as him mourning Steve's death. The theory goes that Steve sacrifices himself to save Dustin or the group, dying heroically in a way that completes his arc from selfish teenager to selfless protector. Dustin, who's already lost Eddie in Season 4, would be wrecked by losing his other older brother figure. It's a compelling theory. Steve dying would hurt. It would hurt loads. The fan base he's built is massive, with people genuinely invested in seeing him get his happy ending. His death would have real emotional weight, which is exactly what a final season needs. But I reckon Steve is actually safe. The theory is too obvious at this point. Everyone expects it. The internet has collectively decided Steve is dying, which means the Duffers probably have something else planned. They've shown throughout the series that they like to play with expectations, to misdirect when possible. Making Steve look doomed only to have him survive, while someone else dies instead, would be very much their style. The Dustin and Steve hug could mean loads of things. Relief that Steve survived something dangerous, grief over someone else's death, an emotional reunion after they've been separated for most of the season. Dustin crying doesn't automatically mean Steve is dead. Dustin cries when he's scared, when he's relieved, when he's overwhelmed. The boy wears his heart on his sleeve. Jonathan, though. Jonathan is looking increasingly like the actual target. He and Nancy have been given significant screen time together in the trailer. They're shown having serious conversations, facing danger as a unit, looking at each other with that particular intensity that suggests something important is about to happen. When a show starts giving a relationship that kind of focused attention in promotional material, it usually means they're building towards something. And in a final season, that something is often tragedy. Jonathan has also been sort of adrift the past couple seasons. His storyline in Season 4 was mostly about lying to Nancy and being stoned with Argyle. He hasn't had a major character arc of his own since the early seasons, when he was protecting Will and struggling with his family's financial situation. Giving him a heroic death would provide the meaningful conclusion his character hasn't really gotten otherwise, and the emotional impact would be massive. Jonathan is Will's brother, Joyce's son, Nancy's boyfriend. His death would affect multiple main characters in profound ways, forcing them to grow and change in response to the loss. It would hurt, but it would also feel earned in a way that random deaths don't. Steve, meanwhile, has completed his arc already. He's become the person he needed to be. He's learned to care about others, to put himself in danger for the right reasons, to find meaning beyond popularity and superficial relationships. He doesn't need to die to prove anything. He's already proven it. Let the man survive and get his 6 little nuggets. He's earned it. To cap this video off, let's talk about what all these dark theories actually mean for how the series ends, and why we're all so obsessed with predicting the worst possible outcomes. So after diving through all these dark theories, what does it actually mean for how Stranger Things ends? And maybe more interestingly, why are we all so obsessed with predicting the worst possible outcomes for characters we love? There's this tension at the heart of any beloved series heading into its finale. On one side, you've got fans who've invested years of their lives in these characters and want to see them happy. They want everyone to survive. They want the victory to be clean and the losses to be minimal. They want Steve to get his RV full of kids, Eleven and Mike to have their happy ending, Will to finally catch a break after everything he's been through. On the other side, you've got the narrative demands of a story that's been building tension and stakes for 5 seasons. If everyone survives with minimal consequences, if the final battle doesn't cost anything meaningful, then what was the point of all that build-up? A finale without real stakes feels hollow, like the journey didn't actually matter, because nothing was truly risked. The Duffers have to balance these competing needs. Give fans enough of what they want, that the ending feels satisfying, but deliver enough tragedy and loss, that the victory feels earned and the stakes feel real. What's interesting is how these dark theories function as a kind of emotional preparation. By imagining the worst possible outcomes, by convincing ourselves that Eleven is dying, or Will is being possessed, or Steve is sacrificing himself, we're essentially bracing for impact. If the actual finale is less tragic than what we've imagined, it'll feel like a relief. If it's exactly as dark as we predicted, we'll feel vindicated in our anxiety. Either way, the theories give us some sense of control over an experience we can't actually control. The Duffers have said that Season 5's deaths will serve the story rather than being for shock value. That's actually a really important distinction. Shock value deaths are when a character dies suddenly and brutally, just to surprise the audience, without any real narrative purpose beyond making people gasp. Those deaths feel cheap because they don't honour the character's journey or contribute meaningfully to the themes. Deaths that serve the story, though, those are different. Those are when a character dies in a way that completes their arc, that forces other characters to grow, that says something important about the themes the show has been exploring. Bob's death in Season 2 served the story because it showed the real cost of heroism and pushed Joyce and the kids to fight harder. Eddie's death in Season 4 served the story because it completed his arc from coward to hero and gave weight to the group's victory over Vecna. If Eleven dies or leaves permanently, it would serve the story by showing that some sacrifices are necessary and some powers are too dangerous to exist unchecked. If Will sacrifices himself, it would serve the story by bringing his arc full circle from victim to hero. If Jonathan dies protecting his family, it would serve the story by finally giving him a meaningful conclusion after seasons of being sidelined. These deaths would hurt, but they'd also feel right in a way that random deaths wouldn't. Stranger Things has always been about the cost of fighting darkness. Not just the physical danger, but the emotional and psychological toll. The kids have grown up faster than they should have. They've seen things no one should see. They've lost innocence and childhood and normalcy. The show has never pretended that facing these threats doesn't change you fundamentally. A finale that acknowledges that cost, that doesn't pretend everything can go back to how it was before, would be true to what the show has been saying all along. You can't fight monsters and come out unchanged. You can win, you can survive, but you'll carry the scars forever. That's very true to life, honestly. We all face things that change us. We all make sacrifices for the people we love. We all have to decide what we're willing to risk and what we're willing to lose. Stranger Things has always used its supernatural elements as metaphors for real struggles, real fears, real growing pains. The finale should honour that by showing that victory comes with a price. But there's also something to be said for hope, for the idea that fighting is worth it, even when the cost is high. That protecting the people you love, standing up against evil, refusing to give in to despair, these things matter even if they hurt, even if they scar you, even if they take something from you that you can never get back. The best ending for Stranger Things would probably be bittersweet. Not everyone survives, but enough do that there's hope for the future. The Upside Down is defeated, but its influence lingers in ways that can't be erased. The characters move forward, but they carry the weight of what they've experienced and who they've lost. That's the kind of ending that stays with you. That feels earned. That honours both the journey and the audience's investment in these characters. We've spent nearly a decade with these kids. We've watched them grow up on screen, dealing with supernatural threats, while also navigating crushes and friendships and family drama, and all the normal struggles of adolescence. They feel real to us in a way that characters don't always manage to feel. Their losses hurt us. Their victories make us cheer. Whatever the Duffers have planned for the finale, it's going to hit hard. That much is certain. Whether it's the specific tragedies we've predicted or something completely different that we haven't seen coming, the ending will leave us changed. Just like the characters themselves have been changed by their journey through the Upside Down and back again. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's journey into the darkest corners of Stranger Things Season 5. In a future video, I'm definitely going to cover other topics like the Upside Down's true origins, relationship predictions for the finale, the soundtrack and music theories, and loads more Stranger Things content. But until next time, don't have nightmares, and may the lights in your house never flicker. Stay safe and sweet dreams.